Hello and welcome everybody to this review of the new KTM Super Duke 1390. You're interested in how this bike performs on the road and not on track or even in the city? Then this is the right video for you. Stay tuned. A few weeks ago we already published a video about how this bike performs on track. Our dedicated track rider Martin Bauer took this bike and gave it a spin on track. He did things we here didn't even think about doing in our sleeps. But anyways, I think most people, if they buy this bike, will buy it to use it in the city or on public roads. So therefore, let me talk to you about how this bike performs exactly there. Beginning with the city. So this bike is pretty big. It is a 190 horsepower, 200 kilograms dry beast with a thundering V2 engine in it. Now, what does that mean for its city use? Well, one might think that a 1350cc is actually not the best thing to have in the city. However, the Super Duke didn't actually perform bad. With its riding modes, in street mode, in rain mode, but even in sport mode, the acceleration, the throttle response is definitely not too aggressive to be used in the city. So, therefore, no minus points for the Duke in that regard. The sitting position is very upright on the Super Duke. There is definitely no problems with it at all. It is a very comfortable seating position as per usual on a naked bike, and therefore no minus points for the Duke. Now the turning circle is rather bad. I'm just gonna say it as it is because it is pretty bad, which in the city might actually not be that nice of a thing to have on your bike, but that's just the reality with a sporty bike like this. And I wouldn't say that it's too bad, so it's not like you can't use it at all. It's just that it's not going to be as comfortable as a smaller bike. The Super Duke, featuring a 75-degree V-twin, means that it also has a few vibrations on its foot pegs and on its handlebar. The vibrations are pretty fine though. I would say that on the Super Duke, the vibrations produces are not really in the regard of unpleasant. On the contrary, I really like the engine letting me know that it is there, that it exists, and that it is not as quiet as an electric motorcycle. So vibrations, yeah, but not too many, no exaggerations. Even on the foot pegs, it is pretty comfortable in that regard. However, there's one thing I really disliked about this bike in the city, and that is the very, very heavy clutch. Now the clutch lever is it requires a bit of strength to be used, and that, when combined with lots of traffic in the city, red light after red light, makes it a bit annoying. However, not more than that. So the clutch is annoying. Yes, it could be lighter. Maybe it can't be lighter on this bike. It could be lighter on a lighter bike, obviously, which would be more pleasant. But all in all, it is definitely fine. And combined to the clutch lever is this fantastic quick shifter. Now the quick shifter works very, very well. It is smooth like butter. The gears they click into action in a fantastic way. It works with the slightest of touch. The quick shifter already reacts and kicks in the next gear, which you can hear perfectly fine. The quick shifter is a real beauty. However, a few times we landed in a sort of in-between gear, so to say, which means that you're neither in the gear you want to be, neither in the one you used to be. That, however, has not happened frequently. It has happened a few times, And a few times it also happened that from first I went to neutral, or from second shifting down I went into neutral. However, that could also just be my incompetence. Do take that with a pinch of salt. The brakes on this bike are fantastic. Obviously it has the finest Brembo brakes on it, and they are an absolute joy to be used. You can modulate the brakes in a very, very fine way. So the rear brake and the front brake as well. The front brake is the more poignant example, because that is simply a joy to use. The suspension is also top notch. We in the Evo version here have the semi-active suspension in the front, which perfectly absorbs all of the bumps in the city. It is a very, very pleasant feeling. And about its performance on the public roads, in the twisties, that I'm gonna tell you later in this video. Last but not least, the sound. Now we have an Akrapovic exhaust on this bike, so you might say, wow, 1350cc Akrapovic exhaust, you're surely gonna wake your neighbors in the morning when cold starting this bike, or you're gonna annoy them when coming home from work. However, let me tell you, that is absolutely not the case. The Akrapovic exhaust sounds fine from the outside. It's not too exaggerated. It's definitely not an ignorant, loud and exaggerated sound you get from it. It is pretty subtle. It is different from the stock exhaust, I presume. We sadly didn't get to try the 1390 in its stock form, but I think you won't annoy anyone. Sadly, however, the way they engineered the sound is so that the rider actually doesn't hear too much from the bike, more so do the surroundings, which is actually pretty annoying. One would actually say the rider wants to hear all of the sound of the bike, and the surroundings should hear the least possible. But it is fine, all in all. This bike in the city can be used. It wouldn't be my first pick if I were to use it mainly in the city. However, you definitely won't have to sacrifice anything in that regard. So all in all, this bike works very well in the city. The suspension is absolutely fantastic, evens out all of the bumps. Like I said, the sound is not exaggerated. The seating position is fine, absolutely upright and great. The commands are great. The throttle response is not exaggerated at all, even in sport mode. So if you want to buy this bike and want to use it in the city as well, let me tell you, you will not have any problems. It wouldn't be my first pick, but it is still a great bike, even to be used in the city. I almost forgot to mention which would be the mirrors. Now, like I said, this is a gigantic V2 engine in a bike, so therefore we have a few vibrations on the handlebar, on the foot pegs, but not too bad. However, just to be clear, I want to add that the mirrors actually perceive some of these vibrations, and when going at too low RPMs or too high RPMs, you definitely can feel and can see that the mirror's utility suffers from it. So you look in the mirror and you might see all of the cars vibrating, shaking real hard, and it could actually be pretty difficult to make out what or who is behind, but only in very few cases and in a very limited way. So definitely still usable and absolutely appropriate mirrors for this bike in the city as well. Let's move on to the maybe more exciting part about this video, which would be this bike ridden in the twisties. How does it perform? Now let me talk to you about exactly that. Now first of all, I have to say that you have a great overall package here, but I guess that is to be expected at this price range. Speaking of the price, I'm gonna mention it at the very end, so don't escape, don't run away from me. No, let's get back to business. So anyways, this bike has a great riding position. Even for spirited riding, you can really lean off this bike. You can ride it in hang-offs. It really almost wants you to ride it in a hang-off style, which in my opinion is great for all those who like that riding style. But at the same time, if you find that it's too exhausting or anything else, you can definitely keep a neutral riding position and simply ride in a very spirited way and in a very efficient way, in a very fast way as well on this bike. The braking performance is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Front brake, rear brake. You have a very crisp pressure point, so you really feel when the bike starts to brake. You can modulate the brake in a fantastic way, so if you want to slow down a lot, you get to in a very safe way, in a very progressive way. It doesn't hit you in an unexpected way. It is unexpected, so to say, braking performance from the front, from the back as well, from the rear as well. So the brakes, phenomenal. They support you in any way possible, and they are really good enough for every style there is. And for every type of maniac there is to be found on this world, on this bike. So let's speak also about the riding modes. So you get different riding modes on this bike. I'm not going to go into detail, but obviously the sport mode has a more aggressive throttle response than street or rain mode. Now, I have mainly ridden this bike in its street mode because I simply fear the immense power this bike has to offer. Speaking of the immense power, there is no way we could have ever gotten near its peak torque, near its peak horsepower. Like, the peak horsepower is produced at 10,000 RPMs, and in second gear at 10,000 RPMs you are already way over the speed limit in the twisties. So there is really no way to know how much power this bike would actually have in its engine on the twisty roads. Nevertheless, the insane torque it offers and it produces, even at low RPMs, even when riding slowly, is something else. It is simply something else. So in the twisties, overall, the bike handles like a Duke. It is still a Duke at heart. It is a Super Duke at its heart. So it is very agile. It enters the corners in a very easy way. The suspension makes you feel like you're riding on clouds. It is simply that good. Also very good is the fact that you get to change your suspension setups while riding the bike, which is simply fantastic. So cornering, very easy on this bike, very agile. You don't really feel the weight of the bike. It weighs 200 kilos dry, so obviously not nothing, but also not too much. The suspension evens out absolutely every type of road surface you could find, and simply great. What else is there to say? Hang off, neutral, both fine. Suspension, epic. Brakes, fantastic. Sound, like I said, when you rev it up a little bit higher, when the exhaust heats up a bit, it starts sounding a bit more like an Akrapovic. Like I said, the sound is projected backwards and not really into this rider bubble, so the surroundings will hear more of its exhaust than you, the rider, will. Now, I have left many traction control systems and ABS systems activated and other rider assistance systems, that's what I mean. And I have to say it was a very pleasant ride. I personally have never ridden a bike this big before, but it is really no big deal. Like, it is hard to say, but nowadays the electronics really tame the bike. We have almost 200 horsepower and too much torque simply, that the electronics start activating themselves if you want to or not, and they keep you from basically dying. If you accelerate full throttle in second gear, you will feel that the traction control starts activating itself, but it does so in a very controlled way, in a very subtle way, so you don't really know what the electronics of this bike are currently doing. You don't really feel it in an exaggerated way, but you still feel it. So you still know they are there, they are active, they are working, and they help you ride this in a very safe way at all times. So I definitely suggest not riding this bike in its YOLO mode, so to say, everything turned off, except if you have a lot, and I mean a real lot of experience. To come back to the seating position for a moment, you can sit on the bike in a very upright way. Let me show you real quick. This is a very upright riding position, like this. But you can also move your back, move your bum behind, and assume a bit of a more sporty position. And then you can really feel, while sitting on the bike right now, I really do feel how the bike wants to be ridden. So both is fine, a very upright, neutral position and a sporty position. Speaking about riding position, I have to say I did not expect this bike to feel so tall. Now, I am not very tall, but I always say, well, on a naked bike I surely won't have any problems touching the ground with probably both feet at a red light or anywhere else. However, on this bike, with its gigantic tank here and with its simply wide frame and body, I struggle more than I thought I would on this bike with its 835mm seat height. But still, I can still touch both with both feet. However, not as good as I thought. I'm tall, 170 centimeters. I'm not sure how much that is in feet. I'm sorry. The levers for your feet, so the brake and the gear lever, are both pretty inwards. Their position is pretty inwards, so you actually tend to you can't have your feet in a straight position. You need to move them slightly inwards like this to have a good feeling foot position that doesn't make your feet slip. To me it has happened. Maybe it's because of these boots. Anyways, a few times I did slip off the gear lever, off the brake lever, but really nothing to worry about too much. Last but not least, we have winglets on this bike. They're not very useful if you don't ride this bike at 260 kilometers an hour, which can definitely only be reached on the track or in Germany on the Autobahn if you by chance are there. Then they produce a good amount of downforce. On the road, it's really just an aesthetic accessory. The huge rear wheel, the tire it's a 200 tire, makes it so that you have a lot of grip in the corners. You can really feel this tire sticking on the great asphalt and the great tarmac we have here in Spain, and so that makes it feel good as well. The last point I'm gonna talk to you about is its aesthetics. Yes, the bike comes in an orange tone, in the 30th anniversary Duke orange tone, which in my opinion looks pretty okay. Not my favorite color, but anyways, aesthetics are a very subjective matter, so I'll leave that up to you. And with that, I think I can conclude this part as well. Let's talk about the prices of this bike. Now we, like I said, have the EVO version here in front of us. And the prices do vary based on your country, based on your region as well. So obviously I cannot indicate all of the prices around the world here in one video. I will limit myself to what tends to be the European range of prices. So let me compare this bike to its competitors. Now we have the Super Duke R here coming in at 22,800 euros. So let's say 23,000 euros for the base model Super Duke and 24,300 euros for the EVO version. Now, the competitors, what might be a competitor of this bike? Maybe something like an MT10. An MT10 costs 16,000 euros in its normal version and 19,300 in its SP version. The MT10 SP actually costs 3,000 euros less than the Super Duke R in its stock, in its normal version. Now the Speed Triple RS, the 1200cc Speed Triple, costs 19,000 euros. The M1000R costs 22,800 euros. So about the same as the Super Duke in its normal version. Something like a Ducati Street Fighter V2 costs 18,400 euros. A Street Fighter V4 costs 23,500 euros. And a Aprilia Tuono V4 costs 17,000 euros and an RS V4 about 21,000 euros. So you can see that comparing this bike to its rivals, it seems to be one of the most expensive ones. Do you actually get more from this bike than from the other bikes? Well, that is a very tough question to answer, and I'm not gonna answer it, as you have to decide for yourself which type of bike you prefer. But let me say this: the torque you get from this bike is not to be found in any other bike. You have a gigantic V2 underneath, and I don't think there is any other producer on this world offering something similar to this. So to some extent, this bike doesn't have any rivals if you desire exactly what this bike offers. However, what I do find is ridiculous is that you actually have to buy the quick shifter as an option on this bike. Neither in the stock form, in the standard version, nor in the EVO version do you get the quick shifter as standard. You actually have to pay 340 euros for a quick shifter on a 24,000 euro bike. You can get the tech pack, which includes all of the electronics, but at the same time, which costs about 1,500 euros. But at the same time, they could have included it in this bike as well. Anyways, let me conclude this video saying that this bike is one of a kind. It is one of a kind, it costs a lot of money, but you do get a lot of motorcycle for it. If it is worth it, I'll leave that question up to you. With that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, leave me a like. Let me know in the comments what you think about the SDR. Would you buy it? Would you pass on it? Would you get any of the rival bikes? If you still have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and I will give it my all to answer to each of them. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one.